The envelope hit Caleb Turner's kitchen table with a sound heavier than paper should make. $2 million. Cash. No name, no explanation, just 7 words printed in cold black ink. For your silence, return the girl. His hands trembled as his 7-year-old daughter, Maya, poured cereal in the next room, humming a song her mother used to sing. The mother who died 6 months ago from a disease the doctors couldn't explain. The same week, Caleb lost his job at the water treatment company without warning. And now this. The quiet college student renting his spare room wasn't who she claimed to be. But before I tell you how a desperate father and a runaway heiress brought down a billion-dollar empire, let me ask you something. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you believe ordinary people can still fight power and win, hit that like button right now. Caleb Turner hadn't slept properly in 6 months. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old pipes. He sat at the kitchen table at 2:47 a.m., staring at the envelope like it might explode. The money inside was real. He'd checked 3 times. Crisp hundreds, bundled tight, more cash than he'd seen in his entire life. For your silence. Return the girl. He turned the words over in his mind until they lost meaning. Maya's bedroom door was cracked open down the hall, a slice of yellow nightlight cutting across the worn carpet. His daughter slept the way only children could, completely, trustingly, believing her father would keep the world safe. The spare bedroom door was closed. Behind it, Emily Carter slept too, or pretended to. Caleb pressed his palms against his eyes until stars bloomed in the darkness. 3 months ago, he'd posted an ad online out of pure desperation. Spare room for rent. Quiet building. $600 per month. References required. The responses had been dismal. Flaky students, suspicious characters, people who looked at his daughter too long. Then Emily showed up. She'd been perfect. Too perfect, maybe, but Caleb had been too desperate to care. 22 years old, studying biology at the community college, soft-spoken and polite. She paid 3 months up front in cash, kept to herself, and within 2 weeks had become part of their small routine. She helped Maya with homework. She made pancakes on Saturdays. She never asked questions about Caleb's past or why a 30-year-old single father was renting out rooms. She fit into the gaps in their broken lives so seamlessly that Caleb had stopped wondering why. Until tonight. Until the envelope. He stood and walked to the spare room door, pressing his ear against the wood. Nothing. Just the faint whisper of breathing. He tried the handle, locked, as always. Emily was religious about locking her door. Caleb retreated to the kitchen and pulled out his phone. The screen glowed harsh in the darkness. He scrolled back through the past 3 months, looking for clues he'd missed. Emily never had visitors, never talked about family, paid everything in cash, didn't own a car. Barely owned anything, actually. Just a backpack, some clothes, a laptop she guarded like treasure. And she'd arrived exactly 1 week after Caleb lost his job. He opened his email and found the termination letter from Meridian Water Solutions. Due to restructuring and budgetary constraints, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. No severance beyond 2 weeks. No explanation. After 8 years of faithful service, they'd erased him like a typo. Jennifer had still been alive then, barely. The disease had already hollowed her out. Coughing, fevers, organs failing one by one, while doctors ran tests and found nothing. She died 3 days after Caleb lost his job, and he'd been too shattered to question the timing. But now, staring at $2 million in unmarked bills, questions exploded in his mind like grenades. Return the girl. What girl? Emily? Why would someone pay him a fortune to give back a college student renting his spare room? Unless she wasn't a college student. Unless she was running from something. Or someone. Caleb's phone buzzed, making him flinch. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Silence. Then a man's voice, smooth and cold. Mr. Turner, you received our package. Caleb's blood went ice. Who is this? A friend. Someone who wants to make your life very easy. The voice was educated, expensive. The money is yours, no strings. All you have to do is tell us where the girl is. What girl? Emily Carter. She's been living in your apartment for 3 months. We know everything, Mr. Turner. Where you work or worked. Where your daughter goes to school. We know you're 2 months behind on rent. We know you're drowning. Caleb gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. How do you... The money is just the beginning. Cooperate, and we'll make sure you and Maya are taken care of, forever. New job, new apartment, college fund, everything you lost when your wife died. The mention of Jennifer felt like a slap. Who the hell are you? Someone who cares about Emily's safety. She's sick, Mr. Turner, mentally unwell. Her family is desperate to get her help, but she keeps running. We just want to bring her home. Then why not call the police? A pause. Because we'd like to handle this privately, quietly. Emily comes from a very prominent family. Publicity would be damaging for everyone involved. Caleb's mind raced. If her family's so worried, why haven't they shown up themselves? They're trying to respect her space, but time is running out. Emily is in danger, from herself and from people who want to use her to hurt her family. The money is a thank you for keeping her safe this long. All we ask now is that you call this number when she's asleep, and we'll take care of everything. And if I say no, the voice hardened just slightly. Mr. Turner, we're offering you a way out of poverty, a future for your daughter. Don't let pride ruin that. Think about Maya. Think about what your wife would have wanted. The line went dead. Caleb stood in the kitchen, shaking. He wanted to throw the phone across the room. He wanted to scream. Instead, he forced himself to breathe, to think. Emily comes from a very prominent family. He pulled up his laptop and typed her name into the search bar. Nothing. No social media, no records, nothing. Then he tried something else. He added Carter and Billionaire. The screen flooded with results. Victor Carter, CEO of Apex Development Group, net worth $4.2 billion. Caleb clicked the first link. A business profile, complete with a photo. Victor Carter stood in a sleek office overlooking a city skyline, tall, silver-haired, radiating power and wealth. The article praised his company's aggressive expansion, their recent acquisition of distressed properties across the Midwest, their innovative urban renewal projects. Caleb scrolled down and froze. There, in a smaller photo from some charity gala, stood Victor Carter with his arm around a young woman in an elegant dress. Victor Carter and daughter Emily at the annual Children's Hospital fundraiser. It was her, same face, same dark eyes, same quiet intensity. But in the photo, she looked different, polished, wealthy, like she belonged in ballrooms and boardrooms, not crammed into a spare bedroom in a broke single father's apartment. Caleb's hands trembled as he clicked deeper. Emily Carter, age 22, graduated top of her class from an elite private school. Attended Princeton for 2 years before disappearing from public view. No social media, no interviews, just occasional mentions in society pages, always standing silently beside her father. And then, about 4 months ago, she vanished completely. No public appearances, no photos, nothing. The same time she showed up at Caleb's door. He sat back, his mind reeling. Why would a billionaire's daughter run away and hide in a stranger's apartment? Why would someone offer $2 million to get her back? And why did they mention Jennifer? Caleb stood and paced the kitchen, adrenaline burning through his exhaustion. Something was desperately wrong. Every instinct screamed at him to wake Emily up, demand answers, figure out what the hell was happening. But another part of him, the part that remembered Jennifer's slow, agonizing death, the part that watched Maya grow up without a mother, the part that knew exactly how empty his bank account was, whispered something else. $2 million. A new life. Safety. He looked at the envelope again. Then he looked at Maya's door. His daughter deserved better than this. Better than a father who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford new shoes. Better than a cramped apartment in a building where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought through the walls. Maybe the voice on the phone was telling the truth. Maybe Emily was troubled and her family just wanted her home. Maybe Caleb was the obstacle keeping a sick girl from getting help. Or maybe it was all a lie. Caleb grabbed his jacket and slipped out of the apartment, moving quietly down the stairs and into the cold night air. The street was empty, sodium lights casting orange pools on cracked pavement. He walked 3 blocks to an all-night diner and ordered coffee he didn't drink. He needed to think, to breathe, to figure out what kind of man he was going to be. The diner was nearly empty, just a tired waitress, a trucker hunched over pie, and a guy in a suit typing furiously on a laptop. Caleb sat in a corner booth and stared at his phone. He could call the number back. Hand Emily over. Take the money. Give Maya the future Jennifer had wanted for her. It would be so easy. But something nagged at him, something about the way the voice had mentioned Jennifer, something about the timing of his firing, her death, Emily's arrival. He opened his laptop and started digging. Meridian Water Solutions, the company that fired him. He'd worked there for 8 years as a quality control technician, testing water samples, filing reports, doing the invisible work that kept a city's infrastructure running. He'd been good at his job, never missed a day, never cut corners. So why fire him? Caleb searched for news about Meridian. Most of it was boring: contract renewals, city council meetings, maintenance schedules. But then he found something odd. A small article from 5 months ago, buried in the local news section. Meridian Water Solutions acquired by Apex Development Group in $340 million deal. Caleb's blood went cold. Apex. Victor Carter's company, the same company Emily's father ran. He kept digging, fingers flying over the keyboard. More articles, more connections. Apex Development had been on a buying spree, acquiring water treatment companies, utilities, infrastructure firms across the Midwest. Always in smaller cities, always in neighborhoods that were struggling. And always, a few months later, those neighborhoods would see a spike in property sales, sudden development projects, old buildings torn down and replaced with luxury condos. Urban renewal, the articles called it. Revitalization. But Caleb saw something else. He searched for health reports, hospital records, anything public. And there it was. A cluster of unexplained illnesses in 3 different cities where Apex had acquired water utilities. Respiratory problems, organ failures, cancers. The reports were scattered, written off as coincidence or bad luck. But the pattern was there if you looked close enough. People getting sick, people dying. Just like Jennifer. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. He pulled up a map and marked the cities. All of them had Apex-owned water systems. All of them had seen sudden illness spikes followed by property devaluations and mass sell-offs. It was a pattern. No, it was a strategy. Contaminate the water, make people sick, drive down property values, buy everything cheap, clean it up, develop it, profit. And anyone who noticed, like a quality control technician who tested water for a living, got eliminated. Caleb's hands shook so badly he could barely type. Jennifer hadn't died from some mysterious disease. She'd been poisoned by the company he worked for, the company owned by Emily's father. And Emily, brilliant, quiet Emily, who studied biology and locked her door every night, had figured it out. She hadn't run away because she was sick. She'd run away because she knew. Caleb closed his laptop and sat in the diner booth, staring at nothing. The world had just reorganized itself into something dark and monstrous. Everything he thought he understood, his job, his wife's death, the random cruelty of the universe, was actually connected, deliberate, orchestrated by men in expensive suits who saw human lives as nothing more than obstacles to profit. And his daughter, sleeping peacefully at home, had no idea how close they were to the center of it all. The diner door chimed. Caleb looked up. 2 men in dark suits walked in. They didn't look at the menu. They looked at Caleb. He stood slowly, every muscle tensing. The men approached, moving with the calm confidence of people used to getting what they wanted. "Mr. Turner," the first one said. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the build of someone who worked out for violence, not health. "We need to talk." "I'm not interested." "You should be." The second man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You received our offer. We're here to make sure you understand how serious we are." Caleb glanced at the waitress. She was pointedly looking away. The trucker was gone. The guy with the laptop had vanished. They were alone. "Emily Carter is not your concern," the first man said quietly. "She's sick, confused. Her family wants her home, and you're going to help us make that happen." "Or what?" The second man pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Caleb. On the screen was Maya, walking out of her school that afternoon, backpack bouncing, smiling at something a friend said. Caleb's vision went red. "Touch my daughter and I'll—" "You'll what?" The first man stepped closer. "You're a broke single father with no job and no prospects. We're offering you a fortune. Take it. Go home. Pack Emily's things. Call the number. This all ends quietly, and you and Maya get to live the life your wife would have wanted." Caleb's fists clenched. Every instinct screamed at him to swing, to fight, to protect. But these weren't street thugs. They were professionals, and they had resources he couldn't imagine. "Think about it," the second man said, pocketing the tablet. "You have until tomorrow night. After that, we stop being nice." They left as smoothly as they'd arrived, disappearing into the night like shadows. Caleb stood in the diner, shaking with rage and fear. He paid for the coffee he hadn't drunk and walked home through empty streets, mind racing. They knew where Maya went to school. They knew everything, and they were willing to hurt her to get what they wanted. But what they wanted wasn't just Emily. They wanted silence. They wanted the evidence buried, the pattern hidden, the murders forgotten, Jennifer's murder forgotten. Caleb reached his apartment building and climbed the stairs slowly, exhaustion pulling at every step. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes, and he knew immediately that she knew. "You found the money," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "They called you." "Yes." Emily's hands twisted together in her lap. "I'm sorry. I never meant for you to get pulled into this. I didn't know where else to go." Caleb sat down across from her. "Who are you running from?" "My father, his company. People who will do anything to protect what they've built." "What did they build?" Emily met his eyes, and he saw something ancient there. Not age, but knowledge. The kind of knowledge that hollowed you out. "An empire," she whispered, "built on poisoned water and dead bodies." The words hung in the air between them. Caleb leaned forward. "My wife, Jennifer, did she—" "Yes," Emily's voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I found the reports 3 months ago, hidden files on my father's private server. Meridian was one of dozens of companies Apex bought. They were all doing the same thing, introducing low-level contaminants into water systems. Nothing dramatic, just enough to cause long-term health problems. Cancers, organ failures, things that look natural. Why?" "Real estate," Emily laughed bitterly. "It's always money, isn't it? Contaminate the water, people get sick, property values drop, families sell cheap, desperate to get out. Apex buys everything for pennies on the dollar. Then they fix the water, develop the land, and sell it for millions. My father's company has made billions doing this across the country." Caleb felt sick. "I found the files by accident," Emily continued. "I was home from school, using his computer for a project. I saw a folder marked Site Acquisitions and thought it was just business. But inside were medical reports, death certificates, water contamination studies that were never published, and plans. God, the plans. 15 more cities targeted over the next 3 years. Thousands of people marked for elimination." Her voice shattered. "I confronted him, my own father. I showed him the evidence, begged him to stop. And you know what he said?" Tears streamed down her face. "He said, 'This is how empires are built, sweetheart. Someone always has to pay the price.'" Caleb's hands clenched. "I tried to go to the police, but Apex has connections everywhere. Judges, politicians, law enforcement. I tried to contact journalists, but the few who showed interest ended up backing off or disappearing from the story. My father has too much power, too much money. He can make problems vanish." "So you ran." "I stole copies of everything, every file, every report, every piece of evidence. And I ran. I knew I needed to find someone who could help, someone connected to the company who might understand, someone who had a reason to fight." She looked at Caleb with devastating clarity. "I found you. Caleb Turner. Quality control technician at Meridian. Fired without cause the same week his wife died from organ failure. I hoped, if I could show you what I found, you might help me expose it. But I was too afraid. I kept waiting for the right moment, and now they've found me." Caleb sat back, the weight of it all crushing down. "The envelope, the phone call, the men at the diner. They'll keep coming. They'll offer you money, threaten you, whatever it takes. And if you don't cooperate, they'll hurt Maya. I've seen what they do to people who get in the way." Emily stood, wiping her eyes. "I'll leave, tonight. I'll disappear again, and they'll follow me. You and Maya will be safe." "No." The word came out harder than Caleb intended. Emily stared at him. Caleb stood, something crystallizing inside him. All the grief, all the rage, all the powerlessness of the past 6 months was focusing into something sharp and clear. "You're not leaving," he said, "and I'm not taking their money." "Caleb, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." He moved to the window, looking out at the sleeping city. "My wife died because some billionaire decided her life was worth less than his profit margin. How many others? How many families got destroyed so Victor Carter could add another zero to his net worth?" "Thousands," Emily whispered. Caleb turned to face her. "You have the evidence?" "Everything, hidden in encrypted files." "Then we use it. We blow this whole thing open." "They'll kill us." "They're already killing us. They just do it slow, through water and sickness and destroyed lives, so nobody notices." Caleb's voice was steel. "I have a daughter who deserves to grow up in a world where people like your father can't get away with murder. Jennifer deserved better. All those people deserved better." Emily's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," said Caleb. Pulled out his phone. "But we can't do this alone. We need help, real help. Someone they can't intimidate or buy off." He started searching, fingers flying over the screen. Investigative journalists. Ones with reputations for taking on powerful corporations. Ones who'd survived threats and lawsuits and kept publishing anyway. He found one. Marcus Webb. Award-winning reporter for the National Herald. He'd brought down senators, exposed Pentagon corruption, survived 2 assassination attempts, and kept working. If anyone could help them, it was him. Caleb composed an email, hands shaking. "Mr. Webb, my name is Caleb Turner. My wife was murdered by a corporation that poisoned our city's water to manipulate real estate prices. I have evidence. I have a witness. And I have nothing left to lose. If you're interested in the biggest corporate crime story of the decade, meet me at the Central Library downtown, tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Bring a camera." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Emily watched him, something like hope flickering in her eyes. "They'll come after you," she said. "After Maya." "Let them try." Caleb's jaw set. "I'm done being afraid. I'm done being powerless. They took my wife. They took my job. They think they can take everything and I'll just lie down and accept it. But they're wrong." He looked at Emily, really looked at her. Not a billionaire's daughter, not a mysterious stranger. Just a young woman who'd risked everything to do the right thing, even when it meant betraying her own family. "You're brave," he said quietly, "running away from that life, trying to stop them. A lot of people wouldn't have." Emily's lip trembled. "I'm terrified." "Me too, but we're going to do this anyway." They stood in the kitchen as dawn began to break outside, 2 people from completely different worlds united by a simple, terrible truth. Sometimes the only way to survive is to fight back, even when the odds are impossible, even when you might lose everything, because some things are worth fighting for. And silence, the kind bought with blood money and threats, was a price neither of them could afford to pay. Caleb walked to Maya's room and watched his daughter sleep, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. "I promise," he whispered, "I promise you'll grow up in a world that's better than this." Then he went back to the kitchen, sat down with Emily, and began to plan. They had until tomorrow night before the men in suits came back. They had one chance to expose the truth, and they had everything to lose. But for the first time in 6 months, Caleb Turner felt something other than grief and despair. He felt purpose. The fight was just beginning. The morning came too fast and brought no comfort. Caleb made breakfast with shaking hands while Maya chattered about a spelling test she had that afternoon. Emily sat at the table, pale and silent, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate without eating. The normalcy felt obscene, like playing house while the walls crumbled around them. "Daddy, you're burning the toast," Maya said, wrinkling her nose. Caleb jerked the smoking bread from the toaster and forced a smile. "Guess I'm a little distracted, baby girl." "Is Emily okay?" "She looks sad." Emily managed a weak smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just didn't sleep well." Maya studied her with the unsettling perceptiveness that children sometimes have. "Are you sick like Mommy was?" The question landed like a punch. Caleb saw Emily's face crumple for just a moment before she composed herself. "No, Maya. I'm not sick. I promise. After Caleb dropped Maya at school, checking over his shoulder 3 times, scanning every parked car for men in suits, he returned to find Emily hunched over her laptop at the kitchen table, fingers flying across the keyboard. "What are you doing?" "Making copies," she said without looking up. "Everything I have is encrypted and backed up in 3 different cloud servers, but I'm creating physical copies too. USB drives. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." You don't know that." Emily's voice was flat, exhausted. "These people don't leave loose ends, Caleb. I've seen what they do." There was a city councilman in Ohio who started asking questions about water quality after Apex bought the local utility. He died in a car accident 3 weeks later. Single vehicle collision, no witnesses. The police ruled it mechanical failure. "You think they killed him?" "I know they did. I saw the internal memo congratulating the security team on resolving the situation efficiently." Emily pulled a USB drive from the computer and held it up. "My father runs his company like a military operation. Every threat is neutralized. Every problem is solved. He doesn't see people, Caleb. He sees obstacles and assets." Caleb sat down across from her. "Then why did he let you live? You're the biggest threat of all." Emily's laugh was bitter. "Because I'm his daughter. Because somewhere in that hollow chest, he actually feels something for me. Or maybe he just thinks he can control me, bring me back into the fold eventually. That's why they're offering you money instead of just taking me. They're trying to do this quietly, keep me alive, preserve the family image." She met his eyes. "But there's a limit to his patience. If we go public, if I testify, he'll have no choice. I'll become an obstacle. And obstacles get removed." "We won't let that happen." "How? By meeting some journalist at a library? You think that's going to stop them?" Emily's composure finally cracked. "They own half the judges in this state. They have security teams, lawyers, politicians in their pocket. What do we have? Some files and a dead woman's widower who worked at a water plant." The words hung between them, cruel and true. Caleb took a breath. "We have the truth, and we have each other. That's going to have to be enough." Emily stared at him, eyes red-rimmed. "Why are you doing this? You could take the money and disappear. Give Maya everything she needs. No one would blame you." "I'd blame me." Caleb's voice was quiet but firm. "And one day Maya would be old enough to ask questions. What would I tell her? That I sold out the woman who tried to stop the people who killed her mother? That I chose money over justice?" He shook his head. "Jennifer raised her to be brave. I'm not going to teach her to be a coward." Emily's face softened. For a moment she looked very young, very lost. "Your wife would be proud of you." "My wife would tell me I'm an idiot for picking a fight I can't win." Caleb smiled sadly. "But she'd do the exact same thing." They spent the morning preparing. Emily organized the evidence into folders. Water contamination reports, internal memos discussing property acquisition strategies, medical records showing illness clusters in targeted cities, financial documents proving the connection between contamination and profit. The pattern was undeniable once you saw it all laid out. Caleb read through page after page, his anger building with each new revelation. Children with leukemia, elderly couples forced to sell homes their families had owned for generations, whole neighborhoods slowly poisoned while Victor Carter's net worth climbed into the billions. "There are 15 cities here," Caleb said, his voice hollow. 15 places where they did this. 16 if you count the one they're planning next. Emily pulled up a map covered in red pins. Greenfield, small town, about 2 hours north. Apex just bought the water utility there last month. According to the timeline in my father's files, contamination starts in 6 weeks. Caleb stared at the map. Each pin represented thousands of lives, families who had no idea they were being systematically destroyed for profit. "We stopped them," he said. "We expose everything, and we stop them." At 11:30, they prepared to leave for the library. Emily disguised herself as best she could, hair pulled back, cheap sunglasses, a hoodie Caleb had given her. She looked nothing like the polished young woman from the charity gala photos. Caleb's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered it. "Mr. Turner." The same smooth voice from the night before. "Have you made your decision?" "I'm thinking about it." "Think faster. Our patience has limits. I need more time. This is a big decision. A pause. You have until 8 o'clock tonight. After that, the offer expires and we handle this differently. The line went dead. Caleb looked at Emily. They're getting desperate. Or they're planning something. We need to move. They took 2 buses to get downtown, switching routes twice to make sure they weren't followed. The Central Library was a massive stone building from another era, all columns and marble steps. Inside, it smelled like old paper and floor polish. Marcus Webb was waiting in the reference section, exactly where Caleb had specified. He was in his 50s, gray-haired and weather-beaten, with the look of someone who'd seen too much and refused to look away. He wore jeans and a faded jacket, a camera bag slung over his shoulder. "Mr. Turner?" He stood, offering his hand. Caleb shook it. "Thanks for coming. You said you had evidence of corporate murder. That's not something I ignore." Webb's eyes shifted to Emily. "And you are?" "The witness," Emily said quietly. Webb studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a small recording device. "Tell me everything." They found a study room on the 3rd floor, away from the main reading areas. Caleb locked the door, and Emily spread the evidence across the table. Printouts, USB drives, tablets with encrypted files. Webb's expression didn't change as Emily talked, but his hands started moving faster, taking notes, asking questions, occasionally snapping photos of documents. He was a professional, and he knew a legitimate story when he saw one. "Victor Carter," he said, finally. "You're talking about bringing down one of the richest men in America." "I'm talking about stopping a mass murderer," Emily replied. "Same thing." Webb leaned back. "The problem is proof. You have internal documents, but a good lawyer will argue they're fabricated. You have medical records, but correlation isn't causation. You have water contamination reports, but Apex will claim they inherited those problems and were working to fix them." "What about the memos?" Caleb demanded. "The ones that literally discuss property acquisition strategies tied to contamination events." "Circumstantial. They'll say it's out of context, that you're misinterpreting standard business communications." Webb rubbed his face. "Don't get me wrong, this is explosive, but Victor Carter has an army of lawyers who specialize in making stories like this disappear. We need something undeniable. A smoking gun." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled out her phone and started typing. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked. "Getting you a smoking gun." Her fingers flew across the screen. "My father keeps his most sensitive files on a private server, accessible only from his home office. Financial records, strategy memos, things that would destroy him if they ever became public. I know the access codes." Webb leaned forward. "You can get into his personal server?" "Remotely. I built the security system for him 2 years ago as a college project. I know every back door." Emily looked up, her face set. "But if I access it, he'll know. The system logs every entry. The moment I pull those files, he'll know exactly where the breach came from." "Then you'll lose your only advantage," Webb said. "Surprise." "We don't have surprise anyway. They already know I'm the leak." Emily's hands were steady now, purpose replacing fear. "But if I can download the core financial records, the actual bank transfers, the shell companies, the money trail connecting contamination events to property purchases, that's undeniable proof. That's the smoking gun you need." Caleb grabbed her wrist. "Emily, if you do this, they'll know exactly where you are. They'll come for you. They're already coming for me. This just speeds up the timeline." She met his eyes. "We have to do this, Caleb. It's the only way to make sure the story sticks." Webb was already setting up his camera. "How long will the download take?" 10, maybe 15 minutes if the server's running clean. Then we do it now and I start uploading the story the second we have the files. Once it's public, they can't bury it." Webb pulled out his laptop. "I have a direct feed to my editor. We can have this on the website in under an hour." Emily nodded and started typing, her face illuminated by the laptop screen. The room fell silent except for the click of keys and the hum of the library's ventilation system. Caleb paced by the door, every nerve screaming at him that this was too exposed, too dangerous. They were in a public building with security cameras and limited exits. If Victor Carter's people tracked them here, "I'm in," Emily whispered. On her screen, folders began appearing. Financial records spanning a decade. Shell companies with innocuous names hiding millions in illegal transactions. Email chains discussing contamination timelines and property acquisition targets. The entire criminal enterprise laid bare in spreadsheets and memos. It's beautiful, Webb breathed, snapping photos as fast as he could. Downloads at 30%, Emily said. Come on, come on! Caleb's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his blood went cold. A text message. No number. We know where you are. Leave the girl and walk away, or we come in shooting. We've got company, Caleb said quietly. Webb didn't look up from his camera. How long do we have? Not long enough. Caleb moved to the window. 3 floors down, 2 black SUVs had pulled up to the library's entrance. Men in suits were climbing out, moving with military precision. Downloads at 60%, Emily said, her voice tight. We need to move now, Caleb urged. If we disconnect, we lose everything. The server will lock me out permanently. Emily's fingers flew across the keyboard. Just a few more minutes. The men were inside the building now. Caleb could hear distant shouts, the kind of authority that moved crowds. Webb grabbed his laptop and started uploading files to his encrypted server. I'm sending everything we have to my editor. If we get grabbed, the story still goes live. 80%, Emily said. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Heavy, purposeful footsteps. They're on this floor, Caleb said. He looked around the small study room, searching for options. One door, one window that didn't open. They were trapped. 90%. The footsteps stopped right outside their door. 95. The door handle rattled. Someone knocked, hard and official. Security! Open the door! Download complete. Emily yanked the USB drive from her computer and shoved it into Caleb's hand. Run. I'm not leaving you. They won't hurt me. I'm his daughter. Emily pushed him toward the window. But they'll destroy you and they'll bury this story. You have to get that drive to safety. The door shuddered under a heavy impact. They were breaking it down. Webb had already moved to the window, forcing it open despite the old paint. There's a fire escape on the east side, 1 floor down. We jumped to the ledge and climbed down. That's insane, Caleb said. So is letting them win. Webb was already climbing out. The door splintered. Caleb saw men in suits pushing through, saw Emily step forward to block their path. Stop, she shouted, her voice ringing with authority he'd never heard before. I'm Emily Carter. You touch these people, and I'll make sure my father knows you compromised his operation. The men hesitated just for a second. It was enough. Caleb went through the window, his heart hammering as his feet found the narrow stone ledge. Webb was already moving along the building's facade toward the fire escape, surprisingly agile for his age. Behind them, Caleb heard Emily's voice, strong and clear. I'm coming home voluntarily. Tell my father I'm ready to talk. But if anything happens to Caleb Turner or Marcus Webb, I'll destroy him myself. Caleb wanted to go back, wanted to fight, but Webb grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. She's buying us time. Don't waste it. They reached the fire escape and scrambled down, jumping the last 6 feet to the alley below. Caleb's ankle screamed in protest, but held. They ran, cutting through back streets and side alleys, putting distance between themselves and the library. Webb pulled out his phone as they ran, talking rapidly to someone on the other end. I'm sending you the files now, everything. Run it immediately. Full spread, homepage feature. I don't care if legal hasn't vetted it. We run it now, or we lose it. They ducked into a parking garage, hiding behind a concrete pillar, while Webb's phone uploaded gigabytes of evidence to his editor. Caleb clutched the USB drive like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Maybe it was. Upload complete, Webb said finally. Story goes live in 20 minutes. Caleb sagged against the pillar, his mind racing. Emily, gave us the win. Don't let it be for nothing. Webb's face was grim. They'll take her back to her father, but once this story breaks, she becomes the most important witness in America. They won't dare hurt her. You don't know that. I know that girl just sacrificed herself so we could expose one of the biggest corporate crimes in history, so we're going to make sure her sacrifice matters. Caleb closed his eyes. Maya was at school, safe for now. Emily was in the hands of men who worked for the monster she was trying to stop. And he was hiding in a parking garage with a USB drive full of evidence that might bring down an empire or get them all killed. His phone buzzed. Another text. You made a mistake, Mr. Turner. We offered you mercy. Now you get justice. Caleb showed it to Webb. The journalist's jaw tightened.
They're going to come after you hard, after both of us.
We need to get you somewhere safe. I need to get my daughter. Then we do that first. Webb pulled out his car keys. But after that, you and Maya are going into protective custody. I have contacts at the FBI who owe me favors. They moved quickly through the city, staying off main roads. Webb drove an old sedan that looked like 100 others, invisible and forgettable. Caleb checked his phone obsessively, terrified he'd see news of something happening at Maya's school. But the messages that came were different, from numbers he didn't recognize, reporters, lawyers, people who'd seen the story already circulating in press circles, asking for comment, verification, interviews. Webb glanced at his own phone and smiled grimly. It's live. Front page of the Herald. Billionaire CEO accused of systematic murder for profit. Every major outlet is already picking it up. Caleb felt a surge of something between terror and triumph. They'd done it. The truth was out there now, spreading like wildfire across the internet, where Victor Carter's money and influence couldn't stop it. But that meant the stakes had just gotten exponentially higher. They reached Maya's school 15 minutes before dismissal. Caleb went inside while Webb waited in the car, engine running. The principal's office was crowded with parents. Caleb pushed through, his heart racing until he saw Maya sitting in a chair, kicking her legs and looking annoyed at being pulled from class early. "Daddy, Mrs. Henderson said I had to come to the office, but I didn't do anything wrong." Caleb scooped her up. "I know, baby. We just need to go home early today." "Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. We're just going on a little adventure." The principal, a stern woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, caught his arm as he turned to leave. "Mr. Turner, there were men here earlier asking about Maya. They said they were with child services doing a routine follow-up after your wife's death, but something felt off. I told them they needed to make an appointment." Caleb's blood turned to ice. "When was this?" "About an hour ago. They left when I wouldn't release Maya to them, but they said they'd be back with the proper paperwork." "Thank you." Caleb forced himself to stay calm. "If anyone asks for her again, don't tell them anything. Don't confirm she's a student here. Don't confirm I'm her father. Nothing." Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes widened, but she nodded. "Is Maya in danger?" "I'm making sure she's not." Caleb carried his daughter toward the exit, moving fast. They piled into Webb's car and drove, heading north out of the city. Maya asked questions that Caleb deflected with promises of explanations later. In the rearview mirror, he watched for black SUVs, for any sign they were being followed. Webb made calls on a Bluetooth headset, coordinating with his editor, touching base with FBI contacts. The story was exploding. Major networks were running segments. Social media was erupting. The name Victor Carter was trending worldwide. "The Bureau's opening an investigation," Webb reported. "Federal prosecutors are already looking at the evidence. This is moving fast." "What about Emily?" Caleb demanded. Webb was quiet for a moment. "No word yet, but there's a team of agents heading to the Carter estate right now to interview her." Caleb's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello? Mr. Turner?" Victor Carter's voice was like ice wrapped in silk, cultured, controlled, utterly without warmth. "We haven't been properly introduced. I'm Emily's father." Caleb's grip on the phone tightened. "Where is she?" "Safe. At home. Where daughters belong." A pause. "You've caused quite a disruption to my business interests." "You mean I exposed your mass murder operation?" "Such dramatic language." "I'm a businessman, Mr. Turner. I identify opportunities and I capitalize on them. The fact that some people lack the vision to understand market forces isn't my concern." "You killed my wife." "I've never killed anyone." Victor's voice was maddeningly calm. "I make investments. I acquire assets. If certain parties choose to sell their properties at disadvantageous prices due to health concerns or economic anxieties, that's their choice. I can't be held responsible for the decisions of others." Caleb wanted to reach through the phone and strangle him. "Your company poisoned our water, deliberately. There's proof." "There are allegations, which my lawyers will systematically dismantle. I've weathered far worse storms than this, Mr. Turner. I have resources you can't imagine. By the time this is over, you'll be the one facing criminal charges for stealing proprietary corporate information. The evidence is already public. The FBI is investigating. Victor laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. The FBI investigates many things. Few of those investigations ever reach trial, and fewer still result in convictions. I employ 3 former U.S. Attorneys General as consultants.
How many do you employ?
Caleb felt his hope wavering under the weight of the man's supreme confidence. But I'm not calling to gloat, Victor continued. I'm calling to offer you one final opportunity. Return my daughter, provide a sworn statement that she fabricated the evidence under emotional distress. Do this, and I'll make sure you and Maya are protected from the legal consequences of your theft. Emily came to you on her own, under duress, clearly manipulated by opportunists like you and that journalist. My legal team is already preparing defamation suits against everyone involved in this story. Victor's tone hardened. You're a single father with no resources, no job, and no prospects. Do you really think you can fight me? I will bury you in litigation. I will make sure Maya ends up in foster care while you rot in prison for industrial espionage. Or you can be smart. Admit you made a mistake. Save your daughter from the consequences. Caleb looked at Maya in the back seat, oblivious to the conversation, playing a game on a borrowed tablet. I'm not backing down, he said quietly. Then you're a fool, and fools don't survive contact with reality. Victor's voice went cold. You have 48 hours before my lawyers file charges. Enjoy what time you have left with your daughter. It's running out. The line went dead. Webb had been listening on speaker. He's bluffing, trying to scare you. Is he? Caleb's voice shook. He's right about everything. I don't have resources. I can't fight an army of lawyers. What if he does take Maya? Then we make sure that doesn't happen. Webb's jaw set. I'm taking you to a safe house. FBI protection. Emily's testimony plus the evidence you provided is enough to start building a criminal case. Victor Carter may be rich, but he's not untouchable. They drove for another hour, eventually pulling up to a small house in a quiet suburb. Webb made a call, and within 20 minutes, 2 federal agents arrived. They were professional, efficient, and made it clear that Caleb and Maya were now under official protection. The house was comfortable but sterile, safe but suffocating. Maya explored the rooms with a child's curiosity while Caleb sat at the kitchen table and watched the news coverage spiral. Every major network was running the story. Financial analysts were predicting the collapse of Apex Development Group's stock price. Politicians were calling for investigations. Victims' families were organizing, hiring lawyers, demanding justice. And in the center of it all was a photo of Victor Carter, smiling at a charity gala with his daughter at his side. Emily. Caleb wondered if she was watching the same coverage, if she understood what she'd set in motion, if she regretted it. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number.
Don't stop fighting. Emily. Somehow she'd gotten access to a phone. The message was brief, but the meaning was clear. She was still in this. Still standing, and so was he. Caleb pulled Maya onto his lap and held her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid realness of her in his arms. Daddy, why are we hiding? She asked. Because sometimes doing the right thing makes bad people angry, Caleb said carefully. But we're safe here, I promise. Is Emily okay? Emily's very brave. She's helping stop some bad people from hurting others. Maya thought about this. Like a superhero? Exactly like a superhero. Outside, the sun was setting. Somewhere across the city, in a mansion Caleb had only seen in photos, Emily Carter sat in her childhood home, surrounded by wealth and power, and the father who'd built an empire on poisoned water and broken lives. Somewhere in that same city, federal agents were building a case. And somewhere in the darkness, Victor Carter's people were planning their next move. The war had just begun. The safe house felt smaller with each passing hour. Caleb stood at the kitchen window watching federal agents rotate shifts in an unmarked sedan parked across the street. Maya had finally fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from a day she didn't fully understand. The television played on mute, images of protests outside Apex Development headquarters flickering across the screen. His phone vibrated. Marcus Webb. Turn on Channel 7, the journalist said without preamble. Caleb found the remote and unmuted the television. A breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen as a reporter stood outside what looked like a congressional building.
announcing emergency hearings into allegations of corporate malfeasance and environmental crimes. Senator Patricia Morrison, chair of the Senate Environmental Affairs Committee, stated that testimony will begin as early as next week, with Emily Carter reportedly agreeing to appear as a witness. Caleb's heart jumped. She's testifying? Voluntarily, according to my sources. Webb sounded cautiously optimistic. Her lawyers contacted the committee this afternoon. She's apparently been locked in her father's estate since they brought her back, but she managed to get a message out through her mother. Her mother? Catherine Carter. She's been separated from Victor for years, lives in Boston. Apparently, Emily reached out to her, and Catherine hired independent counsel. The family's fracturing in real time. Caleb watched footage of Emily from years ago, a teenager at some formal event, standing stiffly beside her father. Even then, there was something in her eyes, a distance, an awareness that she didn't belong in that world. What about the FBI investigation? Caleb asked. Moving faster than anyone expected, the evidence Emily pulled from Victor's private server is a prosecutor's dream: shell companies, wire transfers, internal communications discussing contamination timelines and property values in the same breath. They're building a RICO case. How long? Weeks, maybe months. Victor's lawyers are already filing motions, trying to suppress evidence, claiming illegal search and seizure. But the public pressure is enormous. Stock price dropped 40% today. Shareholders are demanding answers. 3 board members resigned. Caleb felt a grim satisfaction. Victor Carter's empire was cracking, but empires didn't fall quietly. There's something else, Webb said, his tone shifting. I'm hearing rumors that Victor's people are going after Emily's credibility. Leaked medical records suggesting she's had psychiatric treatment, insinuations that she's unstable, painting her as a troubled daughter acting out against her father. That's bullshit. Of course it is. But it doesn't have to be true to be effective. They're trying to poison the well before she testifies. Webb paused. Which is why we need to get ahead of it. I want to run an exclusive interview with you. Tell your story. Jennifer's death, your firing, everything. Make this personal. Make people understand what Victor Carter actually did to real families. Caleb's instinct was to refuse, to stay hidden, keep Maya safe, let the legal system handle it. But then he thought about Jennifer, wasting away in a hospital bed while doctors shrugged and ran more tests. He thought about all the other families in all the other poisoned cities, people who didn't even know they'd been murdered for profit. When? He asked. Tomorrow. We'll do it here at the safe house. Keep the location secure. I'll bring a camera crew I trust. An hour interview, and we'll have it online by evening. Okay? Caleb, Webb's voice softened. This is going to get ugly. Once you go public, there's no taking it back. Victor will come at you with everything he has. Let him come. I'm done hiding. They spoke for a few more minutes about logistics before hanging up. Caleb sat in the darkened living room watching his daughter sleep and wondered what Jennifer would think of all this. She'd always been the brave one, the one who spoke up when others stayed silent. She taught Maya to stand up to bullies, to defend friends who couldn't defend themselves. She would have been terrified, and she would have done it anyway. The next morning brought more news. A federal judge had issued a restraining order preventing Apex Development from destroying any documents. Trading in the company's stock was temporarily suspended pending investigation, and most significantly, 3 more whistleblowers from other Apex subsidiaries had come forward with their own evidence of contamination and cover-ups. The dam's breaking, one of the FBI agents told Caleb over breakfast. Agent Sarah Chen was in her 30s, sharp-eyed and professional. Once people see that others are willing to talk, they find their courage. We're getting tips from all over the country. Will it be enough to convict him? If Emily testifies and the evidence holds up? Yes. Victor Carter's looking at decades in federal prison. Chen poured coffee. But he's not going down without a fight. These powerful types never do. Webb arrived at noon with a compact camera crew, just 2 people, both veterans of investigative journalism who'd covered war zones and corporate scandals. They set up in the living room while Maya watched cartoons in the bedroom, oblivious to the cameras and lights. We'll start with background, Webb explained, clipping a microphone to Caleb's collar. Tell me about Jennifer, about your life before all this.
Then we'll walk through the timeline. Her illness, your firing, Emily's arrival.
I want people to understand this isn't abstract. This is about real people with real lives.
The camera's red light blinked on. "Tell me about your wife," Webb said gently. And Caleb talked. For the first time since Jennifer's death, he really talked about her. Not the sanitized version he gave Maya, not the brief acknowledgments he offered acquaintances who asked how he was doing.
He talked about the woman he'd loved for 12 years, the mother who sang off-key in the kitchen and stayed up late helping with school projects, and believed with absolute certainty that the world could be better if people just tried harder. He talked about watching her die, confused and scared, while doctors offered platitudes and no answers. He talked about losing his job, losing his home, losing everything except Maya, and the desperate hope that tomorrow might be better than today. And he talked about Emily, a stranger who became a friend, who saw injustice and chose to fight it, even when it meant betraying her own father. "What do you want people to know?" Webb asked toward the end. Caleb looked directly at the camera. "That this can happen to anyone. Victor Carter didn't see us as people. We were just numbers on a spreadsheet, obstacles to profit. He poisoned my wife. He poisoned thousands of people across this country. And he did it because he could, because he thought no one would stop him." His voice hardened. "But he was wrong. People like Emily, people like me, we're standing up, and we're not backing down until he faces justice for every life he destroyed." The interview wrapped after 90 minutes. Webb reviewed the footage, nodding with satisfaction. "This is powerful. Really powerful. We'll have it edited and posted by 6. Caleb felt drained, like he'd run a marathon. But there was also relief. The story was out there now, in his own words, unfiltered. Agent Chen's phone rang. She stepped away to answer it, but Caleb saw her expression change. When she returned, her face was grim. "There's been a development. Emily Carter tried to leave her father's estate this morning. Security stopped her. There was an altercation." Caleb's stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" "Physically, yes. But witnesses saw it. Staff members, delivery people. She was literally being held against her will. Her lawyer filed an emergency motion an hour ago. A judge just issued an order allowing Emily to leave the estate and enter protective custody pending her testimony." Victor's going to lose his mind. He already has. His lawyers are screaming about parental rights and defamation, but the law is clear. Emily's 22, an adult. She can't be held prisoner. Chen allowed herself a small smile. "She's being transported to a secure location as we speak. Probably one very similar to this." Caleb felt a wave of relief so intense it was almost painful. Emily was safe. She was out. The television news picked up the story within the hour. Footage of Emily leaving the Carter estate, flanked by federal agents and lawyers, her face set with determination. Reporters shouted questions that she didn't answer, but her body language said everything. She wasn't running anymore. She was walking forward, ready to face whatever came next. Victor Carter appeared on camera an hour later, standing on the steps of his corporate headquarters surrounded by attorneys. He looked composed, unruffled, every inch the powerful executive used to controlling narratives. "My daughter is a troubled young woman who has been manipulated by opportunists seeking to damage my company," he said smoothly. "I love Emily deeply, and my only concern is for her well-being. These allegations are completely false, and we will prove that in court. Apex Development has always operated with the highest ethical standards, and we will cooperate fully with any legitimate investigation." The reporters pressed him about the evidence, the whistleblowers, the mounting accusations. Victor's smile never wavered. "I have complete faith in the legal system. The truth will prevail." Watching him, Caleb felt a chill. This was a man who'd built an empire on calculated cruelty and called it business. He wasn't afraid. He believed he would win. Maybe he was right. The interview with Caleb posted at 6 p.m. and went viral within hours. Comments flooded in, messages of support, stories from people in other cities who'd lost loved ones to mysterious illnesses, fury at corporate greed, demands for justice. By midnight, it had been viewed 5 million times. Caleb's phone exploded with messages. Old friends from Meridian reaching out, former coworkers sharing their own suspicions about the company. Even some of Jennifer's doctors cautiously admitting they'd noticed unusual illness clusters, but had been discouraged from reporting them. "You started something," Agent Chen said,
scrolling through her own phone. People are angry, really angry. There are protests planned in 15 cities tomorrow. The next 72 hours blurred together in a chaos of legal maneuvering and media frenzy. Victor Carter's legal team filed motion after motion trying to delay the congressional hearings, suppress evidence, and discredit witnesses. Federal prosecutors countered with their own filings. The stock market reacted violently, Apex's value plummeting as investors fled. And through it all, Emily prepared to testify. Caleb didn't see her, but Webb kept him updated. She was working with prosecutors 18 hours a day, walking them through every document, every email, every piece of evidence she'd compiled. Her testimony would be the centerpiece of the congressional hearing, the moment when a billionaire's daughter looked America in the eye and explained exactly how her father had built his fortune on poisoned water and dead bodies. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, 3 days after Caleb's interview posted, 3 days that felt like years. Wednesday night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat in the safe house kitchen drinking coffee and watching news coverage. Legal analysts debated the strength of the case. Financial experts discussed the collapse of Apex's business model. Political commentators argued about corporate regulation and oversight. But underneath it all was a simpler story. A story about greed and power, about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage, about refusing to stay silent when silence meant complicity. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Hello? Mr. Turner? Emily's voice, quiet but steady. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Emily, relief flooded through him. Are you okay? I'm safe, protected, terrified. A pause. I wanted to thank you for believing me, for standing with me when you had every reason to walk away. You gave me a reason to fight. After Jennifer died, I felt so powerless, like nothing I did mattered. You showed me it does. Tomorrow's the hearing. I'm going to tell them everything. Every crime, every death, every dollar my father made from destroying people's lives. Her voice wavered. I'm going to betray my own father on national television. You're going to tell the truth. That's not betrayal. That's courage. Emily was quiet for a long moment. He called me tonight. Got access to a phone somehow, even though he's not supposed to contact me. He said if I testify, I'll destroy the family legacy. That my mother will never forgive me. That I'll spend the rest of my life regretting this decision. What did you tell him? I told him the family legacy is murder, and I'd rather spend my life fighting to make that right than one more day pretending it's okay. She took a shaky breath. I'm scared, Caleb. What if I freeze up there? What if his lawyers destroy me on cross-examination? What if none of this matters and he walks away free? Then we keep fighting. We don't stop until we win. Caleb's voice was firm. You're not alone in this, Emily. There are millions of people watching tomorrow who want to see justice done. You speak for all of them. You speak for Jennifer. You speak for every person Victor Carter ever saw as disposable. No pressure, right? Emily laughed weakly. You can handle it. I've seen what you're made of. You're stronger than you know. They talked for a few more minutes before Emily had to go. After hanging up, Caleb sat in the darkness and thought about the journey that had brought them here. A desperate room rental that became a friendship that became a partnership that became a fight against one of the most powerful men in America. Tomorrow, that fight moved to the biggest stage of all. Thursday morning arrived cold and clear. Caleb watched the congressional hearing on television, Maya beside him on the couch, eating cereal and asking occasional questions he did his best to answer. The hearing room was packed. Senators sat in a curved row on an elevated platform, their expressions ranging from skeptical to outraged. Cameras lined the walls. Reporters filled the gallery. And at the witness table, flanked by lawyers, sat Emily Carter. She looked young and small under the harsh lights, but when she raised her right hand to be sworn in, her voice was steady. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Senator Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, leaned forward. Ms. Carter, thank you for your courage in coming forward today. I understand this is difficult, testifying about your own father's alleged crimes. But the American people deserve the truth about what happened in communities across this nation. She paused. In your own words, please tell us what you discovered. Emily took a breath. Then she began to speak.
She walked them through finding the files, the initial shock of understanding what they meant, the growing horror as she realized the scope of her father's operation. She described cities by name, families by name, death tolls, and profit margins laid out side by side in spreadsheets. My father built Apex Development on a simple formula, Emily said, her voice carrying through the chamber. Find struggling communities with aging infrastructure. Acquire the local water utility. Introduce chemical contaminants into the water supply. Nothing dramatic, just enough to cause long-term health problems. Wait for people to get sick. Watch property values collapse as families desperate to escape sold their homes for pennies on the dollar. Buy everything cheap. Fix the water. Develop the land. Sell it for millions. A murmur ran through the gallery. Senator Morrison's face was stone. You're testifying that your father, Victor Carter, deliberately poisoned American cities for profit? Yes, systematically, over the course of a decade. 16 cities confirmed, with plans for more. And you have evidence of this? Extensive evidence, financial records, internal communications, medical reports, water contamination studies that were never published, strategy memos discussing timelines and target demographics. Emily looked directly at the camera. My father didn't see people. He saw opportunities. Every sick child was a step toward cheaper real estate. Every funeral was a line item in a profit calculation. The questions continued for hours. Senators from both parties pressed for details, skeptical at first but growing increasingly convinced as Emily methodically walked them through document after document. Her testimony was devastating, not because it was emotional, but because it was precise. Clinical. She spoke like the scientist she'd trained to be, presenting evidence and letting the facts speak for themselves. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Victor Carter's attorney, a silver-haired man named Thomas Reeves, approached the witness table for cross-examination. He smiled warmly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Carter, I'm sorry you're going through this difficult time. I know your relationship with your father has been strained. Emily's expression didn't change. I have no relationship with my father anymore. Precisely. You're estranged, angry. Some might say you have a motive to fabricate these serious allegations. I'm not fabricating anything. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence you claim to have obtained from your father's private computer, without permission. That's theft, isn't it? It's whistleblowing. It's illegal access to proprietary corporate information. Reeves pulled out a document. In fact, don't you have a history of mental health issues? Depression, anxiety, treatment for emotional instability? Emily's lawyer objected immediately, but the damage was done. The question hung in the air, the insinuation clear. Emily leaned forward, her voice cutting through the commotion. I sought therapy after discovering that my father was a mass murderer. Yes, that caused me anxiety and depression. Wouldn't it cause you anxiety to learn that the person who raised you, who you loved, was responsible for thousands of deaths? She looked directly at Reeves. I'm not the one on trial here. My mental health is not the issue. The issue is whether my father committed crimes. And the evidence proves he did. The gallery erupted. Senator Morrison gavelled for order. Reeves tried several more angles, questioning Emily's expertise, her motivations, her credibility, but she didn't break. Every attack was met with calm, reasoned responses backed by documentation. By the end of her testimony, 6 hours after she'd been sworn in, Emily Carter had laid out a case so comprehensive, so damning, that even Victor's own lawyers looked shaken. Senator Morrison addressed the room. This committee will be forwarding our findings to the Department of Justice with a recommendation for immediate criminal prosecution. Ms. Carter, thank you for your testimony. Your bravery today may have saved countless lives. Emily nodded, exhausted, and was escorted out by federal agents. Caleb watched it all from the safe house, Maya asleep against his shoulder. When it was over, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. The news coverage that followed was unanimous. Emily's testimony had been a turning point. Public opinion, already hostile to Victor Carter, became absolutely toxic. Protests swelled. Shareholders filed lawsuits. Business partners severed ties, and the Department of Justice announced they would seek indictments within the week. That night, Caleb's phone rang. Marcus Webb. Have you seen the news? All of it. 3 of Victor's top executives just took plea deals. They're flipping on him to save themselves. The federal case is airtight now. Webb sounded jubilant. It's over, Caleb. Victor Carter's going to prison. Caleb closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 6 months of grief and rage finally beginning to lift. What happens now? Arraignment next week. Trial in a few months. But the outcome isn't in doubt. The evidence is overwhelming, and now his own people are testifying against him. Webb paused. You did this. You and Emily. You took on one of the most powerful men in America, and you won. After hanging up, Caleb sat in the darkness and thought about Jennifer, about the life she should have had, the years she should have seen Maya grow up. He couldn't bring her back, but he'd made sure the man responsible would face justice. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. The arraignment came 5 days after Emily's testimony, in a federal courthouse surrounded by protesters and media trucks. Caleb watched it unfold on television from the safe house, Maya coloring on the floor beside him while history happened in real time. Victor Carter walked into the courthouse in a tailored suit, flanked by lawyers who looked like they cost more per hour than Caleb used to make in a month. His expression was calm, almost bored, as if this were just another inconvenient business meeting. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions he didn't acknowledge. That's the bad man? Maya asked, looking up from her drawings. Caleb nodded, his throat tight. That's him. He doesn't look scary. The scariest people usually don't, baby. Inside the courtroom, the charges were read. Conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, environmental crimes, wire fraud, corporate manslaughter. The list went on for 15 minutes, each count representing lives destroyed, families shattered, communities poisoned for profit. Victor pleaded not guilty to everything. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Holland, set bail at $50 million. Victor's lawyers didn't blink. The money was posted within the hour, and he walked out of the courthouse a free man until trial. Technically free. But the world had changed around him. Apex Development's stock was worthless now, the company in receivership as federal authorities seized assets. Board members had resigned en masse, business partners publicly distanced themselves. The Carter name, once synonymous with success and wealth, now meant something entirely different. He'll try to run, Agent Chen said that evening, standing in the safe house kitchen with coffee she wasn't drinking. Men like Victor Carter don't accept defeat. They always have an escape plan.
Can he? Caleb asked. With federal charges, doesn't he have to surrender his passport? He did, but he has resources. Private planes, shell companies in countries without extradition treaties, decades of connections built on money and favors. Chen's expression was grim. We're watching him closely, but if he decides to disappear, he might manage it. The thought made Caleb's stomach turn. After everything, the idea that Victor might escape justice felt unbearable.
But Chen's concern proved unnecessary. 2 days later, 3 more of Victor's former executives took plea deals and provided testimony that connected him directly to contamination orders. Text messages, emails, recorded phone conversations where Victor explicitly discussed introducing chemicals into water systems and timing property acquisitions to coincide with illness outbreaks. The case shifted from strong to insurmountable. Federal prosecutors announced they were seeking life imprisonment without parole. Caleb's phone rang constantly now. Lawyers representing victims' families, wanting him to join class action lawsuits. Journalists requesting follow-up interviews. People from cities across the country sharing their own stories of mysterious illnesses that now made terrible sense. One call stood out. A woman named Sandra Mitchell from Ohio, her voice shaking as she explained that her husband had died 3 years ago from liver failure. The doctors had called it environmental exposure but couldn't identify the source. Now she understood. Their city's water utility had been acquired by Apex 6 months before her husband got sick. I blame myself, Sandra whispered. Thought maybe I should have made him go to the doctor sooner, should have pushed harder for answers. But it wasn't my fault. It was murder. I know, Caleb said, his own voice rough with emotion. I blame myself too, for not protecting Jennifer, for not seeing what was happening. But it wasn't on us. It was on him. Are you going to the trial? Sandra asked. If they'll let me. Good. I want him to see our faces. I want him to know we're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. Caleb promised to be there, And after hanging up, he sat for a long time thinking about all the Sandra Mitchells in the world. All the people who'd lost someone and never knew why, who'd carried guilt and grief that wasn't theirs to carry. They deserved to see Victor Carter face consequences. They deserved to watch justice happen. A week before the trial was scheduled to begin, Emily called. It was late, past midnight, and Caleb had been staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. "Did I wake you?" she asked. "No, can't sleep either?" "Haven't slept properly in weeks." Emily sounded exhausted. "The prosecutors want me to testify again at the trial. Walk the jury through everything like I did at the hearing. Are you ready?" "I don't know." The congressional hearing felt different, formal but distant. But being in a courtroom, looking at my father while I explain how he's a murderer, her voice broke. "How do you do that? How do you destroy someone you used to love?" Caleb thought about Jennifer, about the rage he'd felt watching her suffer, about the hatred that had burned in him when he learned her death was deliberate. "You focus on everyone else he destroyed," Caleb said quietly. "You remember that your love doesn't erase his crimes, that protecting him means abandoning thousands of innocent people who never got justice. It still hurts. It's supposed to hurt. That means you're human. That means you're nothing like him." Emily was quiet for a moment. "My mother reached out yesterday. She wants to meet before the trial starts. How do you feel about that?" "Conflicted? She divorced my father years ago, moved away, barely stayed in contact. Part of me wonders if she knew, if she suspected what he was doing and chose to look away." Emily's voice hardened. "But she's offering to testify too, about his character, his obsession with wealth, things she witnessed during their marriage. The prosecutors think it could help establish pattern of behavior. Will you see her?" "I think I have to, for closure if nothing else." A pause. "Caleb, after this is over, after the trial, what happens to us? To people like us who stood up?" Caleb didn't have an answer. He'd been so focused on the fight, on getting to this moment, that he hadn't thought much about what came after. "We rebuild," he said finally. "We take whatever pieces are left and we make something new. What if there aren't enough pieces? Then we start from scratch. But we do it knowing we fought for something that mattered." They talked until Emily's lawyer called her away to prep for another deposition. After hanging up, Caleb walked to Maya's room and watched her sleep, her face peaceful in the glow of her nightlight. Whatever came next, he'd make sure she knew the truth. That her father had been scared but fought anyway. That ordinary people could stand against power and sometimes, just sometimes, they could win. The trial began on a gray Monday morning in early November. The federal courthouse had been transformed into a fortress, security checkpoints at every entrance, metal detectors, and armed guards. The overflow crowd gathered outside, including victims' families holding photos of loved ones who'd died, protesters demanding corporate accountability, and media from around the world. Caleb sat in the gallery with Maya beside him, her small hand gripping his tightly. Marcus Webb was 2 rows back, notebook ready. Sandra Mitchell sat across the aisle, wearing a photo button with her husband's smiling face. And at the defense table, impeccably dressed and radiating controlled fury, sat Victor Carter. His legal team had expanded to 8 attorneys, each one a specialist in criminal defense, corporate law, or character assassination. They exuded confidence, the kind that came from winning cases that should have been unwinnable. But the prosecution had something Victor's money couldn't buy. They had the truth. Lead prosecutor Amanda Reyes was a veteran of white-collar crime cases, known for her methodical approach and devastating cross-examinations. She stood before the jury, 12 ordinary citizens who would decide Victor Carter's fate, and began her opening statement. "Over the next several weeks, you're going to hear about one of the most systematic and callous criminal enterprises in American history. You'll hear testimony from scientists, from former employees, from grieving families. You'll see documents that prove beyond any shadow of doubt that the defendant, Victor Carter, deliberately poisoned American cities to manipulate real estate markets and generate billions in profit." She walked the length of the jury box, making eye contact with each person. "The defense will try to convince you this is about a troubled daughter seeking revenge against her successful father. They'll present character witnesses and business experts who will tell you Victor Carter is a philanthropist, a visionary, a misunderstood genius. They'll argue that correlation isn't causation, that illness happens, that business is complicated." Amanda paused, letting the silence build. But the evidence will show you something very simple. Victor Carter made a choice. When faced with the decision between human life and corporate profit, he chose profit every single time. And people died because of that choice. Not dozens, not hundreds. Thousands of people across 16 cities, poisoned slowly so no one would notice the pattern. She pulled up a slide showing photos of victims. Jennifer's face was among them, smiling in a picture from Maya's 4th birthday party. Caleb felt his daughter stiffen beside him. These are real people, Amanda continued. Parents and children and grandparents. People who trusted that their water was safe to drink, that the companies managing their utilities were operating ethically, that someone would protect them from the kind of calculated evil will prove Victor Carter embodied. The prosecution's case unfolded over 3 weeks, each day bringing new testimony that tightened the noose around Victor's neck. Water quality experts explained how the contamination was introduced and how it would have been impossible to miss during standard testing. Former Apex employees described being ordered to falsify reports and threatened into silence. Medical professionals presented statistical analyses showing illness clusters that perfectly matched contamination timelines. Then came the financial evidence. Forensic accountants walked the jury through shell companies and wire transfers, showing exactly how Victor had profited from each poisoned city. Purchase orders for chemicals that had no legitimate use in water treatment, acquisition contracts signed days after illness outbreaks began, profit margins that spiked whenever communities started dying. The numbers were staggering. Victor Carter had made over $4 billion from his contamination scheme, and it had cost approximately 4,000 lives, roughly $1 million per death. That was the math Victor's spreadsheets had calculated. The price at which a human life became acceptable collateral damage. The courtroom listened in horrified silence as the evidence mounted. Even Victor's lawyers looked shaken, their confident facade cracking as witness after witness destroyed their client's credibility. But the moment everyone had been waiting for came in the trial's 4th week. Emily Carter took the stand. She wore a simple dark suit, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked younger than her 22 years, but spoke with the authority of someone who'd been forced to grow up too fast. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, spectators standing in the aisles, overflow crowds watching on screens in adjacent rooms. Camera feeds broadcast to millions watching at home. Amanda Reyes approached the witness stand gently. "Ms. Carter, I know this is difficult. Take your time." Emily nodded, her hands folded in her lap. "Can you tell the jury about your relationship with your father?" Emily looked at Victor for the first time since entering the courtroom. He stared back, his expression unreadable. "I loved him," she said quietly. "Growing up, he was my hero. Brilliant, successful. Someone who built an empire from nothing. He taught me about business, about strategy, about seeing opportunities others missed." Her voice caught. "I wanted to be just like him." "When did that change?" "When I found out what he'd actually built his empire on." Emily walked the jury through, finding the files. The same story she'd told at the congressional hearing, but with more personal detail. She described confronting her father in his study, the files spread across his desk, demanding to know if they were real. "What did he say?" Amanda asked. "He told me to grow up." Emily's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. "He said business required hard choices, that weak people got crushed and smart people found ways to profit from it. He said the families in those cities would have lost their homes eventually anyway, that economic forces were inevitable, and he was just efficient about it." "Did he show any remorse?" "None. He was annoyed that I was upset. He said I was being emotional and irrational, that I didn't understand how the world really worked." Emily looked at the jury. "He called the people who died acceptable losses. Those were his exact words. Acceptable losses." A murmur ran through the gallery. Amanda pulled up documents on the screen. "Do you recognize these?" "Yes. Internal memos from my father to his executive team. This one here discusses timing contamination in Greenfield to coincide with a city council vote on development zoning. This one calculates optimal illness rates for maximum property devaluation without triggering federal investigation." "Optimal illness rates," Amanda repeated. "Your father was calculating how many people could get sick before anyone noticed?" "Yes." "There are algorithms, predictive models. The whole operation was designed to stay just under the threshold where authorities might intervene. The testimony continued for 2 days. Emily methodically destroyed any possible defense, her scientific training evident in how precisely she explained the contamination process, the profit mechanisms, the deliberate nature of every decision.
Victor's lead attorney, Thomas Reeves, approached cross-examination like a surgeon approaching a delicate operation. Ms. Carter, you've admitted to illegally accessing your father's private files, to theft of corporate property. I've admitted to whistleblowing, yes. You had keys to his office, access to his computers because he trusted you, and you violated that trust. Emily met his eyes. He violated the trust of thousands of families who thought their water was safe to drink. I think that's a more serious betrayal. Reeves tried different angles. He questioned her expertise, her interpretation of documents, her motivations. He presented evidence of Emily's psychiatric treatment, insinuating instability. Isn't it true you've been diagnosed with major depressive disorder? Yes, after discovering my father was a mass murderer. Wouldn't you be depressed? Isn't it possible your mental state has colored your interpretation of what you found? No, the documents speak for themselves. My mental health doesn't change the fact that chemical purchase orders exist, that contamination reports exist, that people died in exactly the patterns my father's strategy memos predicted. The cross-examination lasted a full day and accomplished nothing. Emily didn't break, didn't contradict herself, didn't give Reeves any opening to exploit. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, the prosecution's case was ironclad. The defense tried to mount a response. They called character witnesses who testified about Victor's philanthropy, his business acumen, his contributions to urban development. They presented expert witnesses who questioned the causation between contamination and illness, suggesting other environmental factors could explain the death clusters. But it was weak, and everyone knew it. The prosecution had created a narrative so complete, so well documented, that no amount of character testimony could overcome it. After 6 weeks of testimony, closing arguments began. Thomas Reeves gave it everything he had. He painted Victor as a visionary businessman targeted by a vindictive daughter and opportunistic prosecutors. He argued that Apex had actually improved communities, that some people getting sick was tragic but not criminal, that business decisions made in good faith shouldn't be second-guessed with hindsight. Victor Carter is not a perfect man, Reeves concluded, but he's not a murderer. He's an entrepreneur who took risks, who sometimes made mistakes, but who never intended to harm anyone. The prosecution wants you to believe he's a monster. I'm asking you to see him as what he actually is, a human being who built something remarkable and is now being destroyed by people who don't understand the complexity of modern business. Then Amanda Reyes stood for the prosecution's closing. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. The defense wants you to believe this case is complicated, that business is nuanced, that we can't really know what Victor Carter intended. She paused. But we can know, because he wrote it down. She pulled up a memo on the screen. This is from Victor Carter to his chief operating officer, dated 4 years ago. It reads, "Proceed with Phase 2 contamination in Riverside. Projections show optimal illness onset within 6 months. Property devaluation of 40%, acquisition window of 18 months. Estimated profit margin 400 million, acceptable mortality rate 800 to 1,000. She let that sit. Acceptable mortality rate. Victor Carter calculated how many people would die, decided that number was acceptable, and ordered it done anyway. That's not business complexity, that's premeditated murder. Amanda walked the jury through the evidence one final time, connecting every piece into an unbreakable chain. Victor Carter made $4 billion. 4,000 people died. He knew they would die. He planned for them to die. And he profited from their deaths. She looked at each juror. That's not just criminal. It's evil, and it's your job to hold him accountable. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Caleb barely left the courthouse, afraid to miss the verdict. Maya stayed with Agent Chen, safe and occupied with coloring books and movies. Emily waited in a secure room with her lawyers. Victims' families gathered in the halls, sharing stories, finding solidarity in their shared grief. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the jury sent word they'd reached a verdict. The courtroom filled within minutes. Caleb found his seat,
his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. Marcus Webb squeezed his shoulder. Sandra Mitchell reached across the aisle and took his hand. Victor Carter sat at the defense table, his expression a mask of composure. But Caleb could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight grip of his hands on the table edge. The jury filed in, their faces revealing nothing. Judge Holland addressed them. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman, a middle-aged man in a cardigan, stood. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find?" "Guilty." The word hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then the courtroom erupted. Caleb felt tears streaming down his face as the foreman continued reading. "On the charge of racketeering, guilty. On the charge of criminal environmental contamination, guilty. On the charge of corporate manslaughter, guilty." Guilty on all 47 counts. Victor Carter's composure finally cracked. His face went white, his lawyers immediately huddling around him, already planning appeals. But it didn't matter. The jury had spoken. Victor Carter, billionaire CEO, architect of an empire built on poisoned water and dead bodies, had been found guilty of mass murder. Judge Holland gavelled for order, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Sentencing will be held in 2 weeks. Until then, the defendant will be remanded to federal custody without bail." Federal marshals moved forward. Victor stood slowly, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. As they led him past the gallery, he looked directly at Caleb. For just a moment, their eyes met. Caleb saw no remorse there, no understanding of what he'd done, just rage that he'd been caught, that his perfect machine had been broken by people he'd considered beneath notice. Then Victor was gone, led away in handcuffs to a holding cell that would be his home until sentencing. Outside the courthouse, the celebration was immediate and overwhelming. Victims' families embraced, crying and laughing. Protesters cheered. Media swarmed, capturing the moment justice had been served. Emily emerged from a side entrance, immediately surrounded by cameras and questions. She looked exhausted but relieved, like someone who'd been carrying an impossible weight and finally got to set it down. She found Caleb in the crowd, and they stood facing each other with everything that had happened between them. "We did it," Emily said, her voice barely audible over the noise. "You did it. You were the brave one." "We both were." She pulled him into a hug, and Caleb held this young woman who'd risked everything to do the right thing, who'd betrayed her own father to save thousands of strangers. When they finally pulled apart, Marcus Webb was there with his camera, capturing the moment for the story that would run tomorrow. "How does it feel?" he asked. Caleb looked at the courthouse, thinking about Jennifer, about all the people who died never knowing their deaths were deliberate. "Like the beginning of something," he said. "Not the end. The beginning of healing, of accountability, of remembering that power isn't absolute, that ordinary people can fight back and win." Emily nodded. "And of making sure this never happens again. That's what comes next. Making sure no one else can do what my father did." The cameras loved it. The story that would dominate headlines for weeks. Billionaire convicted of mass murder. Daughter's testimony brings down corporate empire. Justice served for thousands of victims. But for Caleb, standing in the cold November air with people who'd become family through shared trauma and shared courage, it was simpler than that. It was about Jennifer finally getting the justice she deserved. It was about Maya growing up in a world where evil didn't always win. It was about learning that silence was complicity, that standing up mattered, that one person finding the courage to speak truth to power could change everything. The trial was over, but the real work was just beginning. The 2 weeks between conviction and sentencing felt like holding your breath underwater, waiting to surface. Caleb returned to the safe house with Maya, the weight of the verdict still settling into his bones. The apartment felt different now, temporary in a way it hadn't before. The trial was over, but their lives remained suspended, waiting for the final chapter to close. Maya asked questions he tried to answer honestly, without burdening her with details no 7-year-old should carry. "Is the bad man going to jail forever?" she asked one evening, curled up beside him on the couch. "For a very long time, baby girl." "Good." Maya was quiet for a moment, then looked up at him with Jennifer's eyes. "Mommy would be proud of you, Daddy, for being brave." Caleb's throat tightened. "I think she'd be proud of both of us." The media frenzy continued unabated. Caleb's interview had been viewed over 30 million times. Documentary producers reached out, book publishers made offers, speaking invitations flooded his email. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, wanted to package the narrative of ordinary people defeating corporate evil into something consumable and profitable. Marcus Webb helped filter the noise, turning down the opportunists and connecting Caleb with legitimate journalists documenting the case for public record. But even Webb's publication wanted exclusive rights to Caleb's story, offering money that could change his and Maya's lives. "You don't owe anyone your pain," Webb said when Caleb hesitated, "but sharing it might help prevent the next Victor Carter. That's worth considering." Emily called every few days, usually late at night when sleep eluded them both. She'd moved into a modest apartment in the city, refusing her mother's offer to stay in Boston, determined to rebuild her life on her own terms. The prosecutor said sentencing should be straightforward, Emily told him 3 days before the hearing. "Life imprisonment, no possibility of parole. My father's lawyers are already filing appeals, but they don't expect them to succeed." "How are you holding up?" "Some days I'm fine. Some days I can't get out of bed." Her voice was raw with honesty. "I keep thinking about all the moments I missed, the signs I should have seen growing up, conversations that seemed normal then but look different now. You can't blame yourself for not seeing what he worked so hard to hide." "I know, intellectually I know, but it doesn't make it easier." Emily paused. "Are you coming to the sentencing?" "Wouldn't miss it." "Good. I need to see friendly faces in that courtroom, people who understand what this cost." The day before sentencing, Caleb received an unexpected visitor. Agent Chen arrived at the safe house with a woman in her late 40s, elegant and tired-looking, wearing a designer coat that had seen better days. "Mr. Turner, this is Catherine Carter, Emily's mother. She asked if she could speak with you." Catherine extended her hand, her grip firm despite the tremor Caleb could feel. "Thank you for seeing me. I know this is irregular." Caleb invited her inside, sent Maya to her room with coloring books, and made coffee neither of them touched. Catherine sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around her mug, searching for words. "I wanted to thank you," she said finally, "for protecting Emily when I couldn't, for believing her when she needed someone to stand beside her. She's the one who protected me, who gave me a reason to fight." "I should have seen what Victor was becoming," Catherine's voice cracked. "I knew he was ruthless in business, that he valued money above almost everything. That's why I left him. But I never thought he was capable of actual murder. None of us want to believe that about people we love. I keep thinking about all those families, all those people who died because I was too cowardly to look closely at where his money came from." Tears slid down Catherine's face. "I spent his money, lived in his houses, benefited from his success. Does that make me complicit?" Caleb thought about his own guilt, the questions that haunted him at 3 a.m. Could he have saved Jennifer if he'd been more observant? If he'd questioned his firing more aggressively? If he'd seen the patterns sooner? "Guilt is easy," he said quietly. "Taking responsibility is harder. You're here now. You testified against him. You're supporting Emily through this. That's what matters." Catherine wiped her eyes. "She's stronger than I ever was, braver. I just hope she can forgive me for not being there when she needed me most." "Have you asked her?" "Not yet. I'm afraid of the answer. Ask anyway. Emily's carrying enough weight without adding your regrets to the load." They talked for another hour, two people connected by trauma and the complicated web of Victor Carter's destruction. When Catherine left, she hugged Caleb tightly, whispering thank you like a prayer. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Friday that dawned cold and gray. Caleb dressed Maya in her nicest outfit, explained again what would happen, and promised her favorite restaurant afterward regardless of how things went. The courthouse was even more crowded than during the trial. Victims' families filled every available seat, many wearing photos of lost loved ones as buttons or carrying framed pictures. The air hummed with anticipation and grief and the peculiar energy of people about to witness justice enacted. Caleb found his seat in the gallery beside Marcus Webb, Sandra Mitchell on his other side. Emily sat in the front row with her mother, the two of them holding hands in a tentative reconciliation that was still finding its footing.
Victor Carter was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his expensive suits replaced by prison garb. He looked diminished somehow, the power and presence that had defined him stripped away by conviction and confinement. His legal team surrounded him, still expensive, still fighting, but the confidence was gone. Judge Holland entered, and the room rose as one. "Please be seated." She arranged papers on her bench, her expression grave. "We're here today for sentencing in the matter of United States versus Victor James Carter. Before I impose sentence, I'll hear from those who wish to address the court." The victim impact statements began. One by one, people stood and spoke about loved ones stolen by Victor's greed. Sandra Mitchell talked about her husband, a kind man who'd coached Little League and never missed a Sunday dinner, dead at 46 from liver failure that had seemed random until the pattern emerged. A young woman named Rachel spoke about her mother, a teacher who'd developed brain cancer after Apex bought their town's water utility. An elderly man described watching his wife of 50 years slowly deteriorate, her organs failing one by one, while doctors shrugged and ordered more tests they couldn't afford. The testimonies went on for over an hour, a litany of loss that painted Victor's crimes in the most personal terms possible. Each story was unique, but the thread connecting them was unmistakable. These were ordinary people living ordinary lives until Victor Carter decided their existence was less important than his profit margin. Then it was Caleb's turn. He stood, his legs unsteady, and walked to the microphone set up for speakers. Maya watched from her seat, Agent Chen beside her. "Your Honor, my name is Caleb Turner. My wife Jennifer died 18 months ago from organ failure caused by contaminated water in our city. She was 32 years old." His voice caught, but he pushed forward. Jennifer was a mother, a teacher, someone who believed in people and second chances and making the world better through small acts of kindness. She taught our daughter to be brave, to stand up for what's right, to help people who couldn't help themselves. Caleb looked at Victor, who stared straight ahead, refusing to meet his eyes. Jennifer never knew why she was dying. She spent her last days confused and scared, asking me what she'd done wrong, what we could have done differently. And I had no answers because I didn't know someone had deliberately poisoned her, that her death was calculated, planned, budgeted into a corporate strategy as an acceptable loss. His hands gripped the podium. Victor Carter didn't just kill my wife. He killed thousands of people across this country. He destroyed families, shattered communities, created waves of grief that will ripple forward for generations. And he did it knowingly, systematically, with the same cold calculation he'd use for any other business decision. Caleb's voice hardened. He doesn't deserve mercy. He doesn't deserve the comfortable retirement his lawyers are probably still hoping for. He deserves to spend every remaining day of his life behind bars, thinking about the people he murdered for money he didn't even need. Caleb returned to his seat, his hands shaking. Maya reached for him, and he pulled her close. Emily was called next. She walked to the microphone with the same quiet determination she'd shown throughout the trial. "Your Honor, Victor Carter is my father. I loved him once." Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. "I wanted to be like him. I studied hard, learned everything he taught me about business and strategy and seeing opportunities, and then I discovered that everything he'd taught me was based on a foundation of murder." She looked at Victor, who finally met her gaze. "I gave you a chance to stop. I showed you the evidence, begged you to make it right, to turn yourself in, to at least stop planning new contaminations. And you told me to grow up. You said business required hard choices and weak people got crushed." Emily's composure cracked slightly. Those weak people were children with cancer, elderly couples losing their homes, working families trying to survive. They weren't weak. They were human beings, and you treated them like obstacles. She wiped her eyes. "I'm not asking for leniency. I'm asking for the maximum sentence allowed by law. Because my father made his choices, and now he needs to live with the consequences, just like the families of his victims have to live with theirs." Emily returned to her seat beside her mother, who wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Victor's lawyers made their own statements, arguing for mercy based on his age, his lack of prior criminal record, his charitable contributions. They painted him as a man who'd made mistakes but didn't deserve to die in prison. Judge Holland listened impassively. Then she spoke. "I've presided over many cases in my 20 years on the bench. White-collar crimes, violent offenses, corruption at every level.
but I've never encountered anything quite like this. She looked directly at Victor. Mr. Carter, you orchestrated a criminal enterprise that systematically murdered thousands of American citizens for profit. You didn't do this in a moment of passion or desperation. You planned it. You refined it. You built algorithms to calculate optimal death rates. You created a machine designed to kill people slowly enough that no one would notice the pattern. Victor sat motionless, his expression carved from stone. The evidence presented at trial was overwhelming. Your own daughter testified against you, not out of vindictiveness, but because her conscience wouldn't allow silence. Former employees risked their careers to expose your crimes. Victims' families showed courage and dignity in sharing their pain. Judge Holland's voice was ice. You showed none of those qualities. Even now, you express no remorse, no understanding of the magnitude of harm you've caused. She picked up her sentencing document. On each count of conspiracy to commit murder, I sentence you to 25 years to life, sentences to run consecutively. On the racketeering charges, an additional 40 years. On the environmental crimes, 20 years. In total, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in a federal maximum security facility. The courtroom erupted in applause and tears. Victor's lawyers immediately began filing objections, but it was theater now. The sentence was final. Judge Holland gavelled for order. Additionally, all assets of Apex Development Group and your personal holdings will be liquidated to establish a victim compensation fund. Every family affected by your crimes will receive restitution. You'll leave this world with nothing, Mr. Carter, which is more than you left your victims. Federal marshals moved to escort Victor from the courtroom. As they led him past the gallery, he stopped and looked at Emily one final time. I built an empire, he said, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. I created something that will outlive all of this. You can take my freedom, but you can't erase what I accomplished. Emily stood slowly, her voice clear and strong. Your empire was built on corpses, and it's already erased. No one will remember your success. They'll only remember that you were a murderer who got caught. Victor's face twisted with rage, but the marshals pulled him forward before he could respond. The courtroom watched him disappear through the doors, watched the man who'd believed himself untouchable be led away to spend the rest of his life in a 6x8 cell. Outside the courthouse, the celebration was muted this time. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring back the dead. It couldn't heal the scars or restore what had been stolen. Caleb stood with Maya, watching victims' families embrace and cry and begin the long process of moving forward. Sandra Mitchell approached him, her face wet with tears. Thank you, she said simply, for fighting, for not giving up. Thank you for being brave enough to speak today. They stood together in the cold November air, two strangers connected by shared loss, finding comfort in the knowledge that they'd witnessed accountability. Emily found Caleb as the crowd began to disperse. She looked exhausted but lighter somehow, like a burden had been lifted. It's really over, she said. The trial part is, the healing part just started. I don't know how to do that, how to move forward from this. Caleb thought about the months since Jennifer's death, the slow crawl back toward something resembling normal life. One day at a time. Some days you take 2 steps forward. Some days you fall 3 steps back. But you keep going. Emily nodded. Will you keep in touch? I know we met under terrible circumstances, but you and Maya feel like family now. Of course. You're not getting rid of us that easy. Catherine Carter joined them, still tentative around her daughter, but trying. The 3 of them stood watching the media circus, the protesters celebrating, the machinery of justice slowly grinding to a halt. What will you do now? Catherine asked Caleb. Go home. Or find a new home. The safe house was temporary. He looked down at Maya. Start rebuilding. Figure out what normal looks like. If you need help with that, financial help, please let me know. Catherine's voice was earnest. I know money can't fix what happened, but I have resources from the divorce settlement. Resources that didn't come from Victor's crimes. I'd like to help however I can. Caleb started to refuse, then thought about Maya's future, about college funds and opportunities he couldn't provide alone. Thank you. I might take you up on that.
The weeks after sentencing blurred together in a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The Victim Compensation Fund was established, and Caleb received a settlement that would secure Maya's future and allow him to finally breathe without the constant pressure of financial desperation. It wasn't blood money. It came from liquidating Apex's assets, from seizing the empire Victor had built on suffering. Marcus Webb's exclusive article about Caleb's journey won journalism awards and sparked a national conversation about corporate accountability and environmental justice. Congress passed new legislation strengthening oversight of utility companies and mandating independent water quality testing. The changes came too late for the victims but might prevent future tragedies. Emily testified before additional committees, helping draft regulations that would make it harder for companies to hide contamination. She became an advocate for corporate transparency, using her insider knowledge to close the loopholes her father had exploited. And slowly, carefully, she and her mother began rebuilding their relationship. It would never be what it was. Too much had happened, too many betrayals and absences to simply forget. But they found a new kind of connection based on honesty and shared determination to make something good come from the wreckage. 3 months after sentencing, Caleb signed a lease on a small house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. It wasn't much, but it had a yard where Maya could play and windows that let in morning light. He painted her room her favorite color, hung pictures of Jennifer on the walls so Maya would never forget her mother's smile. He found work as a water quality consultant, hired by municipalities nervous about their own vulnerabilities. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd been fired for being too good at his job, and now cities were paying him to make sure their systems were actually safe. Emily visited often, bringing groceries or helping with homework, seamlessly fitting into the small family they'd accidentally created. She enrolled in graduate school, studying environmental science and policy, channeling her guilt and grief into purpose. On the anniversary of Jennifer's death, Caleb and Maya visited her grave with flowers and stories. Maya talked about school and friends, about Emily teaching her to bake cookies, about the new house and how she thought Mommy would like it. "Daddy says you'd be proud of us," Maya told the headstone, "that we were brave like you taught us to be." Caleb knelt beside his daughter, one hand on her shoulder, the other touching the cold marble. "We got him, Jennifer," he whispered. "The man who did this. He's in prison for the rest of his life. It doesn't bring you back, but it's something. It's justice." Maya placed the flowers carefully at the base of the stone, then turned to her father. "Can Emily come to dinner tonight?" "I'm sure she'd love to." They drove home through streets that felt different now, familiar in a way they hadn't been before. This city had been the site of so much loss, but it was also where they'd found the courage to fight back, where ordinary people had stood against power and refused to be invisible. Emily arrived that evening with ingredients for Jennifer's favorite recipe, a pasta dish she'd taught Emily to make during those brief months when everything had seemed normal. They cooked together in the small kitchen, Maya helping stir, while Emily told stories about culinary disasters, and Caleb pretended to be horrified by their mess. Over dinner, Maya asked the question that had been building for weeks. "Is Emily going to live with us?" Caleb and Emily exchanged glances. "Would you like that?" Emily asked carefully. Maya thought about it with a child's seriousness. "Yes, because then we'd be a real family." "We're already a real family," Caleb said gently. "Families aren't just about who lives in the same house. They're about people who care for each other and show up when it matters." "But Emily could have the spare room, the one she used to rent before." Emily smiled, her eyes suspiciously bright. "I have my own apartment now, remember? But I can visit lots, as much as you want." "Every day?" "Maybe not every single day, but very often." Maya seemed satisfied with this, returning her attention to pasta. After dinner, after Maya had gone to bed with a story and a kiss, Caleb and Emily sat on the front porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "She's resilient," Emily said, "stronger than I was at that age." "She has to be." The world took her mother. She learned early that life isn't fair. But she also learned that people fight back, that justice is possible, that her father would move mountains to protect her. Emily looked at him. "That's a powerful lesson." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd been through war together and survived to find peace on the other side. "Do you ever regret it?" Caleb asked. "Blowing up your entire life?
You could have taken that money, stayed silent, kept your relationship with your father.
Every day I'm grateful I didn't.
Emily's voice was firm. I lost my father, my inheritance, the life I thought I'd have. But I gained something more important. I can look at myself in the mirror. I can sleep at night knowing I did the right thing. She paused. And I gained you and Maya, a family I chose instead of one I was born into.
We're lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one.
The months rolled forward, seasons changing, life gradually finding new rhythms. Victor Carter's appeals were denied one by one, each rejection another nail in the coffin of his empire. News stories about him became less frequent, his name fading from headlines as the public moved on to new scandals. But the families he'd destroyed didn't forget. Support groups formed, networks of people who'd lost loved ones to his crimes. They met regularly, shared stories, found healing in community. Caleb and Maya attended some of the gatherings, adding their voices to the collective remembrance. A year after the trial, Emily graduated with her master's degree in environmental policy. Caleb and Maya sat in the audience, cheering as she walked across the stage. Catherine was there too, beaming with pride that was tinged with regret for all the years she'd missed. At the celebration dinner afterward, Catherine proposed a toast. To Emily, who had the courage to choose truth over comfort, who proved that one person speaking up can change the world. She raised her glass. And to Caleb and Maya, who stood beside her when she needed family most. You gave my daughter something I failed to provide, unwavering support and belief in her goodness. They clinked glasses, this makeshift family assembled from tragedy and choice, bound together by something stronger than blood. Later that night, Caleb tucked Maya into bed and listened to her prayers. She still talked to Jennifer in them, telling her mother about the day's events, asking her to watch over them. "Daddy," Maya said as he turned off the light, "do you think Mommy knows we caught the bad man?" "I think she knows, and I think she's proud of how brave you've been. I miss her." "Me too, baby girl, every single day. But we're okay now, right? We're safe?" Caleb thought about the journey they'd taken, from the depths of grief and poverty to this moment of hard-won stability. They'd lost so much, but they'd also gained understanding, purpose, and a family that chose to be together. "Yes," he said, kissing her forehead. "We're safe. We're going to be okay." And for the first time since Jennifer's death, he actually believed it. The next morning, Caleb received a letter forwarded from Marcus Webb. It was from a woman in Oregon whose husband had died from kidney failure 2 years ago. She'd just learned that her city's water utility had been owned by Apex, that her husband's death fit the pattern of Victor's contaminations. She wanted Caleb to know that his courage had given her answers she desperately needed, that knowing the truth, as painful as it was better than living with questions that had no answers. She ended the letter with a simple line: "Thank you for fighting when you could have chosen silence." Caleb put the letter in a box with dozens of others like it, messages from strangers whose lives had intersected with Victor Carter's crimes. Each one was a reminder of why the fight had mattered, why silence would have been unforgivable. Emily stopped by that afternoon, breathless with news. "I got the job! The EPA position! I start next month!" Caleb hugged her, genuinely thrilled. "That's incredible. They're lucky to have you. I'm going to make a difference. Actually protect people instead of just reacting after they've been hurt." Her eyes shone with purpose. "It's what I should have been doing all along instead of ignoring what was happening right in front of me. You were young. You did the right thing as soon as you understood. Better late than never, right?" Emily looked around the small house that had become her sanctuary. "I'm going to miss this, having you and Maya so close. We're not going anywhere, and EPA offices have weekends off, last I checked." Emily laughed. "True. I'll be back so often you'll get sick of me." "Not possible." Maya burst through the front door, home from school and full of energy. "Emily, can you stay for dinner? We're having spaghetti." "I wouldn't miss it." They cooked together, the three of them moving around the kitchen in practiced coordination. The conversation flowed easily. Maya's stories about school, Emily's excitement about her new job, Caleb's plans to expand his consulting work. It was ordinary. Beautifully, perfectly ordinary. The kind of ordinary that Victor Carter had tried to destroy but ultimately couldn't. Because here they were, still standing, still finding joy in small moments, still building lives that mattered. After Emily left and Maya was asleep, Caleb sat alone in the quiet house and thought about everything that had happened. The envelope full of money that started it all. The investigation that nearly destroyed them. The trial that changed everything. And the young woman who'd shown up at his door months ago, a stranger renting a room, who'd become the catalyst for justice, and the sister his daughter never knew she needed. Life would never be what it was before Jennifer died. That innocence was gone, burned away by the knowledge of how cruel the world could be, how easily evil could hide behind respectability and wealth. But in its place was something harder and truer. An understanding that silence protected the powerful and endangered the vulnerable. That ordinary people had more power than they believed. That choosing courage over comfort could literally save lives. Caleb pulled out his phone and texted Emily. "Thank you for everything. For being brave enough to fight. For giving Maya a family that chose to love her. For showing me that good people still exist." The reply came quickly. "Thank you for believing me when no one else would. For standing with me when it would have been easier to walk away. You and Maya saved my life just as much as I helped save yours. We saved each other." Caleb smiled, set down his phone, and walked to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, houses lit from within with the warm glow of families settling in for the night. Somewhere across the country, in a maximum security prison, Victor Carter sat in a cell thinking about the empire he'd lost and the daughter who'd betrayed him. But here, in this small house with its modest furniture and hand-me-down toys, love and laughter filled the spaces where grief used to live. The fight had cost them everything and given them back more than they'd lost. It had taught them that justice wasn't just something that happened in courtrooms and news headlines. It was something ordinary people created through small acts of courage, through refusing to accept that power meant freedom from consequences, through standing up when every instinct screamed to stay silent. And it had proven something Victor Carter never understood in all his years of calculated cruelty. That human connection, chosen family, and the courage to do what's right were worth more than any empire built on suffering could ever be. Caleb turned off the lights and checked on Maya one last time. She slept peacefully, safe and loved, in a home they'd fought to build from the ashes of tragedy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The work of healing was never finished, the fight for justice never completely won. But tonight, in this moment, they had everything that mattered. They had each other. They had hope. And they had the knowledge that when faced with impossible odds and unimaginable power, they'd chosen courage. They'd chosen truth. And in the end, they'd won.